Joy Reid and AOC had absolute meltdowns regarding the new Supreme Court decisions on affirmative action and the rest of them. And I knew as soon as those decisions came out, as soon as everybody started talking about these Supreme Court decisions on Twitter, that the reactions from the mainstream media would be absolutely glorious. It was like Christmas, because not only was I very much in favor of the decisions of the Supreme Court, but I was also very much looking forward to the meltdowns like we're going to see in this video right here from Joy Reid and AOC. First, let's watch the one from Joy Reid where she just straight up spews, like she tells a personal story or whatever, but the way she interprets this story is totally not the way that I think many others should and do interpret this story as well, as where she talks about how Joy Reid only got into Harvard because of affirmative action. And as Jack Posobiec says, just for anyone who didn't already know, because she's not the sharpest tool in the shed in my opinion. But let's check out this clip from Joy Reid talking about the affirmative action ban for colleges from the Supreme Court.
Well, let me just be clear. I got into Harvard only because of affirmative action. I went to a school no one had ever heard of in Denver, Colorado, in a small suburb. I didn't go to Exeter or Andover. I didn't have college test prep. I just happened to be really nerdy and smart and have really good grades and good SAT scores. But someone came to Denver, Colorado to look for me. A Harvard recruiter flew to Denver, and I met up with her at the Village Inn restaurant and did a pre-interview to pull me into Harvard. I was pulled in, and the schools like Harvard and Yale that I got into affirmatively. Yes. And it was literally not saying we're going to take an unqualified person and put them in Harvard. Yes. We're going to take a very qualified person who we would never know existed and put them in Harvard. That's how I got there. That's how Ketanji got there. That's how Justice Jackson, I should say. Justice Jackson got there. It's how Clarence Thomas got there. But the minute I arrived from my majority black little town, Montbello.
By the way, notice how she will say Justice Jackson, but then she calls Clarence Thomas by his first name. I just wanted to point that out because I think, it's just funny to me. Like, it's nothing too serious, but it's definitely funny how she totally disrespects Clarence Thomas by not calling him by his title, but then she won't say Ketanji. She'll say Justice Jackson instead. I just thought that was funny.
In Denver to Harvard, the first week or two that I was in class, my presence was questioned by white people. I was in this big conference class where some white students stood up and said, those students, the black students, they're only here because of affirmative action. It became a huge argument that we all ended up having.
Yeah, I don't believe it. I don't believe that that's ever happened. I go to school. I went to school in the South. And I've never seen anything like that. I've never heard of anything like that happening. I just don't buy it. And if that did happen, for one, I don't see that happening at Harvard of all places. Maybe that would happen at like a trashier school, but that's not happening at Harvard. Let me know in the comments if I'm crazy on that. But I don't buy it. I just don't buy that happened. Maybe if it did happen, then it's one of the very, very rare cases of that happening. But I just don't believe it. I just don't believe that happened.
This was freshman year. I had never had my academic credentials questioned. I had never had anyone question whether I was intelligent until I got to Harvard. And it was a defining point of my experience there. It's why I really was one of the many reasons I was miserable there my freshman year. Yeah. You feel completely out of place and people keep telling you shouldn't be here. And yet some of the people I went to school with were far less smart than me or the other black folk there. They got in because their daddy and their granddaddy. I went to school with somebody whose name was on one of the buildings. You're going to school with people whose names are on the buildings, who are third and fourth generation legacies, whose parents pumped money into Harvard to get them in. But that affirmative action is okay with this majority.
That's not affirmative action. That's hard work by the parents. That's hard work by whoever created that wealth. And now their offspring and now, their descendants are getting rewarded for their hard work. Their hard work is getting them into these schools. Like, that's not affirmative action. That's just how life should work. You should get rewarded for your hard work. And I'm sure that those students sometimes aren't the best, the ones that get in because their parents pushed in money to the school or whatever. I'm sure those students aren't the best all the time. She's probably right about that. I just don't think that they're at school saying that person shouldn't be here because they only got in because of affirmative action. I don't think they're doing that. I don't see that happening at Harvard.
They said that the people who benefited from slavery, their descendants, who are so far ahead of black folk in terms of opportunity that we'll never catch up to them. I don't care how many Oprahs we get. Those people's affirmative action is A-OK because those people can pay for fancy trips to them. But you people who want to get in just because of your brains, but you're not from a legacy, too bad. You can't come in.
And also, if the people who got in because of affirmative action, if the minorities, if the black people, like she was saying, were much smarter than the white people there, then that just doesn't go with the statistics. And I don't have them on hand, but I think most of the time, whenever students get into law school, from affirmative action, they finish in the bottom 25%, if not drop out of the school. So all of these things, yes, it's a great personal antidote. And I also just noticed that she doesn't have eyebrows. It's kind of freaking me out, but it doesn't really matter. Like, it just doesn't matter. It's an exception to the rule if you just simply look at the statistics for affirmative action students students graduating from law school and other schools as well. It's not just law school, but they finish in the bottom 25%. I'm pretty sure most of the time, if not drop out of the school because they just don't belong there. They get placed there to fulfill a quota, and that's just it's not fair to the students, it's not fair to the institution, and it's not fair to the other students that didn't get in because of the affirmative action. But like I said, AOC also had a meltdown calling for the impeachment of Supreme Court justices. Let's check this out here.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just
Yes.
want to, how do you do that? Are you proposing a law or a bill?
There's several ways. First, we have a Senate Judiciary Committee that is beginning the process of investigating the entanglements and conflicts of interest. Just 1 to 2 weeks before the student loan ruling, the country learned that Justice Samuel Alito was accepting gifts from billionaires who were lobbying against Supreme Court that were lobbying before the Supreme Court against student loan forgiveness. Just weeks before, we learned that he was accepting gifts from them and travel and vacations from them before he decided to vote and rule in their favor. And so I believe that if Chief Justice Roberts will not come before Congress for an investigation voluntarily, I believe that we should be considering subpoenas. We should be considering investigations. We must pass much more binding and stringent ethics guidelines where we see members of the Supreme Court potentially breaking the law.
This is what they do now. This is what they do. They're sore losers. If they end up losing, if a decision doesn't go their way, they not only have meltdowns on CNN like Joy Reid and AOC are having here, but they're calling for subpoenas and investigations and ultimately impeachment and new laws being passed against these Supreme Court justices. That's what these people do now. They're not okay with just a decision going the other way, with the Supreme Court deciding that what they want isn't constitutional. That's not possible. It's not possible for what they want, for the left, for the Democrats, what they want. It's not possible for that to be unconstitutional. It's their way or the highway. And nowadays it's their way or you're impeached. It's their way or you get put in jail like Donald Trump. Like you're literally imprisoning your political opponents now and people that decide that your opinions, that the laws that you want passed are unconstitutional. You're imprisoning them. You're impeaching them. You're investigating them. You're using the law against them. It's ridiculous what's happening here.
As we saw in the refusal, with Clarence Thomas to recuse himself from cases implicating his wife in January 6th, there also must be impeachment on the table. We have a broad level of tools to deal with misconduct, overreach, and abuse of power. And the Supreme Court has not been receiving the adequate oversight necessary in order to preserve their own legitimacy. And in the process, they themselves have been destroying the legitimacy of the court, which is profoundly dangerous for our entire democracy.
If they decide against me, if they go against what I want, therefore they are not having the proper oversight. And the Supreme Court must be reformed. There must be new laws passed against them. They must be investigated, subpoenaed, and ultimately they must be impeached, is what AOC is saying here, because they disagree with me, because the Supreme Court ruling goes against what I personally feel in my heart and what I propagate to my audience and the people who follow me and vote for me. Let me know what you're thinking about all of the meltdowns that are happening on CNN and MSNBC, about Joy Reid, AOC, all these people telling these personal anecdotes, having all their feelings take over. And like I said, dude, just having meltdowns. Once those Supreme Court decisions on affirmative action and the student debt relief and all that stuff came out, I just knew it was going to be Christmas, man. I just knew that we were going to have a ton of meltdowns, and it doesn't seem like these meltdowns from people like AOC and Joy Reid are slowing down anytime soon. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments about these meltdowns.